Don, are you still interested in being an astronaut? Because we'd like to offer you the job. And an exact quote of what I said at that moment was something like, habba, 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 habba. And I finally got the word yes out of my mouth, and then I hung up the phone, and I screamed for 10 minutes. Just like I tried 10 minutes earlier, I was just screaming and bouncing off the walls. Because if you get selected, there's a 99.99% chance you're going to fly. I didn't know when. I didn't know if it would be in 5 years, in 10 years, or 20 years. It didn't matter. I was in the queue. I was in line to go up on the shuttle. So I was 35 years old when I got selected to be an astronaut, and I was 39 years old the first time I flew in space. And I tell many of the students out there, 39 years old is like an old man. But some of these careers are going to take a while to get there. Some of the careers that you pick are going to take a while to get there. And it's a lot of hard work to get into some of these things, but it is worth it. All the hard work that you put into your schoolwork today, it will pay off for you down the road. Many times, you wonder about what you're doing, but it will pay off for you. So for the students out there, be prepared to work hard. There's great things for you at the end of all that hard work, and never give up along the way. If there's anything you want to do in your life, never give up on that. I almost gave up on my dream. I was so close to walking away from it and thought, I'm going to give it one more shot. And I'm glad I did that. It really changed the course of the rest of my life here. This is the crew from my last space shuttle mission, and we typically fly with a crew of 7. The commander is right here. His name is Jim Halsell. He's an Air Force test pilot. He used to fly the SR-71 Blackbird spy plane. Our pilot on the mission is Susan Still, right here. Susan's a pretty unique individual, only the second woman to pilot the space shuttle, and Susan was the first woman to graduate from the Top Gun test pilot school. Top Gun is a special school out in California where the Navy sends their very best Navy fighter pilots to teach them the latest combat maneuvers. Susan was one of our country's best Navy fighter pilots and the first woman to graduate from that Top Gun school. So it was a really cool opportunity to fly with somebody like her. Janice Voss was a PhD in aerospace engineering from Purdue, I think it was. And she was our payload commander, kind of in charge of coordinating all the experiments we were doing on this mission. This is Roger Crouch and Greg Lanteris. Roger worked at NASA headquarters, and Greg worked at NIST, used to be National Bureau of Standards, and he was a combustion scientist. These guys are not career astronauts, but they were selected to fly with us on this one mission to help us out with the experiments. Mike Gernhardt was our flight engineer. His role was to help the commander and the pilot kind of take care of the shuttle. The three of them kind of got us to space, got us back home, and took care of the operation, make sure we had enough pressure and atmosphere and propellant, and everything was working properly for us up there. And that allowed the other 4 of us to do the science experiments on board. This guy you don't recognize, that's what I used to look like 14 years ago before gray hair and wrinkles and glasses. But this is the result of those 17 million miles that Penny told you about. That's what happens. There's the space shuttle on the launch pad, and I took this picture the night before my first launch. And I got up around 11 o'clock at night, went out to the pad about midnight or so with another one of the astronauts. And it is amazing to stand there at the base of your space shuttle. This is about 12 hours before liftoff, and just gaze at this thing, just the incredible technology that you're standing in front of. It gets the butterflies flying in your stomach, like, my God, think about what I'm about to do here in 12 hours. It's just an incredible moment to stand there. The big fuel tank you see in the background, that's the external tank for the shuttle. It holds 500,000 gallons of liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen fuel that burns 3 engines down here at the tail of the shuttle. Then on either side we have these 2 solid rocket boosters that burn for the first 2 minutes of the flight. They provide most of the thrust on liftoff and really get our speed going, so we really rely on them. And here's the space shuttle itself, about the size of a commercial plane you'd see flying in or out of Philly Airport here. And it's only this tiny section in the nose that many of you know. This is the crew compartment. This is the only area that's pressurized for the astronauts. And it's a pretty small area, maybe about the size of your kitchen at home. So, you have 6 other people up there with you in this small area, and that's where you do, eating, sleeping, everything is done in this fairly small area there. So we come out here launch morning, we take an elevator up the side. There's a little access arm that we walk across, and there's a little round hatch in the side of the shuttle that we crawl into. There I am about 3 hours before liftoff in our launch and entry suit. I'm standing in front of Space Shuttle Columbia there, they load us up one at a time and strap us into our seats. So typically I'd get out to the launch pad and I would have maybe a half an hour, 40 minutes before they were ready to strap me in. And it gives you time to think about what you're doing again. In the direction that I'm looking here, about 3.5 miles away, that's where the closest human beings are to you. My family and friends would be in that little viewing area there. And you start thinking about your family that's there and your friends that came down to visit, almost daydreaming, and all of a sudden you'll hear, "Hey Don, we're ready for you." And it's like, okay, take a deep breath of fresh air, and then you walk down the little walkway, and at the end is the hatch of the shuttle there. Before we crawl in, there's a couple of technicians here that help us put on parachutes, helmets, and gloves. They'll check all the equipment to make sure everything looks good. Then I get on my hands and knees, crawl inside, find my seat, and get strapped in there. We strap ourselves in nice and tight. There's a lot of shake and vibration during liftoff, and you want to be strapped in nice and tight with shoulder harnesses and seat belts. So we're very secure in our seats there. And it's pretty quiet until the last couple of seconds of liftoff. The 3 hours that we spend inside, the first 2 hours, there's a lot of joking around going on. There's not much for us to do. The last hour, all that kind of chit-chat and joking around stops, and we're just focused on the mission, going through checklists and not talking at all unless it's something related to the mission. 6 seconds before liftoff, those 3 engines at the tail of the shuttle start coming up to full power. We're still physically bolted down to the launch pad at that point. And once the computers say those 3 engines look good, then we light those 2 solid rocket boosters, and immediately we take off. And liftoff feels like somebody has their hand in the middle of your back, pushing you up into the sky. And that's what the shuttle's doing, pushing us, throwing us up in the air. And on my first flight, I'm strapped in, laying on my back. When I felt the push in my back, I knew we were taking off. I knew we were going somewhere that day. Any moment before that, the computer might not like what it sees, it could shut down the engines. But once you light those 2 solid rocket boosters, you're going somewhere for at least 2 minutes. That's how long they have to burn. And so when I felt that push, I knew we're on our way. I had my helmet on, visor down, and I'm just screaming inside my helmet like, "Yahoo, let's go." Because here was the dream of my lifetime taking place right in front of my eyes, and I could see it happening. It was really an incredible moment, to recognize this is what I wanted, and it's taking place right now. This picture this is 4 seconds after liftoff. We're going 120 miles an hour already. So we don't ease off the launch pad. We literally leap up and accelerate faster and faster. Here's a picture from below. You see the 3 engines burning the hydrogen and oxygen from the big fuel tank, the 2 solid rocket boosters. I sat underneath that window on one of my flights, and I had a little mirror on my knee. You can't turn your head around and look out that window because you got a helmet on and you got the forces. But I had a little mirror that I kind of used as a rear view mirror. I could look down at my knee and out that window, and to watch the flames and smoke in the flame pit just shooting out with such incredible violence. And I'm watching it from about 150 feet away. I think my jaw dropped down and hit the floor watching that. It's like, wow. I'd seen many launches from 3.5 miles away, but to watch that, through that little mirror just 150 feet away, and then watch how fast, you're taking off from the Earth was incredible. This picture is taken from a NASA chase plane a few miles away. We launched right along the coastline of Florida there, about an hour to the east of Orlando. There's 2 shuttle launch pads, and the shuttle is smaller than the red dot on that laser pointer. You can barely see it there, but you see the bright flame from the solid rocket boosters, and that's about 1/4 of a mile long here. And this is maybe 20 seconds after liftoff. I'm probably still screaming inside my helmet at this point. 2 minutes into the flight, we're 25 miles up in the air, and after 2 minutes, we're going about 3,000 miles an hour. And those 2 solid rocket boosters have used up their fuel. They separate off to the side, drop back to Earth. They have parachutes that will open, and these things will land in the Atlantic Ocean about 100 miles offshore. And NASA's got boats out there. We recover these, bring them back to the Kennedy Space Center where they clean them up, they'll load them up with new fuel and use them again on another mission. So at this point we have the shuttle, those 3 white dots and the 3 main engines. Here's our big fuel tank, and that's going to take us the rest of the way to orbit. 8.5 minutes after liftoff, the engines shut down, it gets perfectly quiet, then there's a big kaboom, we fire some explosive bolts and the shuttle separates from that external tank there. And this thing just falls back into Earth and burns up like a shooting star. There's a few heavy metal valves that'll survive re-entry, and we can target where these pieces will land. It's either in the Indian or Pacific Ocean. We make sure we get all the ships out of the way, make sure there's no airplanes flying overhead, that anybody may get hit with pieces of the debris that doesn't burn up. And that leaves us then with the space shuttle orbiting the Earth. Only takes 8.5 minutes to get to space. I bet it takes more than 8.5 minutes to find a parking spot around here, right, sometimes?
Yeah.
But think about that, 8.5 minutes, you're 200 miles above the Earth, you're traveling 18,000 miles an hour, which is 5 miles a second. And you know, you don't have any sense of speed like we have, you know, driving here on the freeways, because you're so far up. It's kind of like being in a commercial jet, and you're going 500-600 miles an hour, but you don't have any sense of speed unless you're flying through clouds, like either climbing or descending there. And the same thing in space. You don't have any sense of that 18,000 miles an hour, but when you look out the window and see, instead of seeing cities go by, you see countries and continents kind of going by. So you know that how fast you're going. You know, if you look out the window and you see something interesting and you want to grab the camera, by the time you get the camera to come back, it's gone. You know, you have to wait for another orbiter to have a shot at it. So you always have to be ready. On 3 of my missions, we had a little space lab, a science module, in the back of the payload bay called Space Lab. And we flew a number of these. There's probably 20 different Space Lab missions that NASA flew. And it was connected, the science module was connected with a tunnel to the crew compartment. So once we got to space, we could float through that tunnel, go back to our science lab and do experiments back there. And there I am in Breglin Terrace working on different experiments there. We would fly in one of these missions anywhere between 100 and 200 different experiments. And they range from life science to fluid physics to combustion science, you know, biology, just a wide range of different experiments that we fly there. I want to tell you just quickly about 2 of the experiments.